Tom, and I am a very grateful alcoholic. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to welcome Jerry and Jill Wills, the other Wills from the Fiesta Group. We're all friends of Steve's. It's great to have you guys here. This is really this is the 21st century, and I had an in-person relationship with Steve for 34 years. I've known him the entire time that I have been sober. And so now I have the pleasure of introducing my in-person AA friend to a whole crowd of people that I've never had an in-person relationship with, but I've had a Zoom relationship with for 7 months. I've been staying sober with a whole bunch of people on this screen. We've had all these experiences together going all the way back to St. Patrick's Day. And it's the wonder of this new AA that we found together. And before I introduce Steve, I have one little story to tell you. I had a came to believe experience with Steve when I was 93 days sober. I had met him at the Java Club here in Jacksonville in the Fiesta Group, and he was 10 years sober. And first of all, when he said he was 10 years sober, I mean, that's preposterous. Nobody goes for 10 years without a drink, but I accepted that. And out of the blue, my neighbor who lived behind me in September, I got sober in June. He offered me 2 tickets to the University of Florida football game in Gainesville, and it was no ordinary game. The Gators were playing Miami, and I had never been to Gainesville to a football game. And my wife was extremely pregnant. The baby was born September 26th, so she wasn't going with me. So I asked my sponsor if he would go with me, and he said yes, that he and his wife were having their 40th wedding anniversary, but he thought he could go. I wanted what he had, a wife who would let him go to a football game on his 40th wedding anniversary. Anyway, we drove down to Gainesville. This is the first time I'd been to a sporting event without drinking. And we went into the stadium there, and it's packed, 85,000 people at this game. And I looked down, and about 5 rows below me, there's Steve. And I'm like, what are the chances that here I am in this crowded football stadium, and there's another guy that I know from AA. And the Gators lost that game to the Miami Hurricanes. And the next day, we were at the 11 o'clock meeting at the Fiesta Group, and Steve was sober, and so was I. So the Gators had lost the game, and we stayed sober. I want you to know that Steve's talk is going to be spiritual tonight, because the Gators were not upset today by the Vanderbilt Commodores. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce my dear friend, Steve. Take it away, Steve.
My name's Steve Vining. I'm an alcoholic. I'm grateful to God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous for another day of sobriety. My sobriety date is June 27th, 1976, and I'm certainly grateful to be here tonight. And I appreciate Tom's introduction, and I'm amazed that he introduced me as a friend. I spent a long part of my life without any friends. People didn't want to know that they knew me. And I'm so grateful today that because of you and because of Alcoholics Anonymous and because of a power greater myself, that I have relationships with other people that was totally impossible when I got here. I want to tell you that that if you're new or you're nearly new, I know there's no other place that you'd rather be tonight than at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you're thrilled to be here. And I want to tell you that I understand that completely, because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I wasn't even an alcoholic. I had some problems, but I'm sure I wasn't an alcoholic, because I had no idea what an alcoholic was, And if you're sitting in this meeting and you're wondering whether or not you're an alcoholic, I can tell you a couple things that might give you a hint. If you've ever described your drinking as a career, you might be an alcoholic. If you've ever been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, there is a good chance that you're an alcoholic. Non-alcoholics are not at meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous unless they're bringing alcoholics there. And so, I tell you that when you're out there and you're drinking and using, there are people that say the strangest things to alcoholics. The people that truly love alcoholics say the strangest things to us. I mean, people would come up to me and they would say things like this. They would say, Steve, if you didn't drink so much, you'd be all right. They'd say, Steve, if you just didn't smoke those funny cigarettes, you'd be all right. Steve, if you just quit putting that stuff up your nose, you'd be all right. If you quit taking those little black pills and make you grind your teeth and talk about stuff you don't know nothing about, you'd be all right. Now, when they say these things to us, they truly have our best interest at heart. They really, really want to help us. But when they say those things to us, what we're clear for the very first time is they have no idea who we are. Because when they say those things to us, when they're standing in front of me, and people that truly love me are saying these things, I'm looking at it and I'm just kind of shaking my head. And what I'm thinking is this: if I quit drinking, I just might kill you. You see, they think you and I have a drinking problem. They think if we quit drinking, we're going to be okay. The truth is, drinking was not an option for me. Drinking was a necessity for me. Drinking was the only thing that ever enabled me to live out there in a world I didn't fit into. And the idea of not drinking terrified me. Because when I drank, it gave me the solution to living. The only problem is it was killing me one day at a time. One day at a time, it was taking me to places I didn't want to go, doing things I didn't want to do. But I want to tell you this: as long as alcohol worked for me, I kept using it. I took my first drink when I was 14 or 15 years old, and I don't know the exact age because I didn't know I was going to have to report for it later. But I do know what I drank. I drank black and white Scotch whiskey and Colt 45 malt liquor mixed together. And I want to tell you something. I'll never forget that night. I was on a boat, and I took that, I mixed that Scotch whiskey and that Colt 45 together, and I drank it. And for the first time in my life, I knew I'd found the secret to living. I knew for the first time in my life, all the fear went away, all the anxiety left me. And I realized for the first time in my life, it wasn't that I was less than everybody, it was because I was better than everybody. They were holding me back because they realized that I was had so much more potential than they did. And I knew. And I want to tell you something, it lasted for 2 or 3 hours. And then I was laying out there on that boat and I was puking my guts out. And when I was puking my guts out, all I could think of myself was this: what a minimal price to pay for the secret of living. And if all I ever had to do was just throw up a little bit, you'd have a different speaker tonight. But those consequences changed. And I'm one of those alcoholics that I suffer from another disease. And I always like to share this just in case there's anybody out there that shares that shares this same disease. I suffer from a secondary disease called terminal intelligence. And if you're new or you're nearly new and you're wondering about terminal intelligence, you'll be sitting in this meeting or a meeting just like this, and you'll be thinking, no, I don't think I need to listen to this guy. No, I don't think I'm going to quit drinking. No. All I got to do is figure it out, and I'm going to be okay. As soon as I figure it out, I'm going to be all right. And we die or we go insane, you see. But I'm one of those guys that I took this terminal intelligence, and I combined it with what I call alcoholic math. And that works a little bit like this. I said things to myself like, if I ever get fired from a job that as a result of my drinking, I think I'm going to quit drinking. And then I say, well, if I ever get fired from a job I really want as a result of my drinking, then I'm going to quit. Then I say, you know what? If I ever get arrested as a result of my drinking, I'm going to quit drinking. Well, if I ever get arrested and I actually have to spend the night in jail as a result of my drinking, then, okay, if I ever get arrested and I have to do more than 30 days, then I'm going to, okay, if I get arrested and they actually take me to the P farm, then I'm going to quit drinking. On and on and on. Let me tell you something. If I ever get divorced as a result of my drinking, I'm going to quit drinking. Well, if I ever get divorced from a woman I actually want to be married to, then I'm going to quit drinking. I'm willing to defend my right to drink. I'm willing to sacrifice everything in my life for the privilege of drinking. That's how important it was to me. At the age of 17, I got an opportunity to make the first major decision in my life. I'd gotten arrested, and back then, this is in the late 60s actually, and back then they gave me a choice, and they said I could either be locked up for 5 years or I could join the Marine Corps. And I told them I was going to join the Marine Corps because I was sick and tired of people telling me what to do. And I went in the Marine Corps, and I went in a private E1, and I got out of private E1. Now, I want to tell you, I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and I got promoted a few times. So getting promoted was not a problem. It was staying promoted that was the problem. Whenever I'd get a promotion, I'd think I knew something, and they clearly knew more than I did. But I had one thing in common with the Marine Corps. In 1971, I was glad I got out, and they were glad I got out. And I got out in 1971, and I decided one day, you know what my problem is? My problem is I need to get married. That's my problem. I need to get married. Well, that's not such an unusual decision. The only problem was I wasn't actually dating anybody. But I mean, look, if we're alcoholics, we all we got to do is if we meet them, and we got to marry them within 90 days. And let me tell you something. We can fall in love quick, right? But we got to marry them before they find out we're really like. And I want to tell you that I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober when I was 25 years old. I'd been married and divorced 3 times. Now, I never celebrated an anniversary. I never stayed married for 1 year. But I did get married. I was one of those guys, I'd like to get married. I just didn't want to be married, When I said I do, I didn't, because I was looking for somebody else to make me feel better about. And as soon as I said I do, I felt worse about myself. But in 1971, when I got out of the Marine Corps and I came back to Jacksonville, I got married. It didn't work out. I got divorced, and then about a year later, I got married again. And we got divorced. When we got divorced, she had the audacity to start dating somebody else, so I married her again. And then I got her pregnant right away because I figured I could hold her hostage for 18 years. And we got divorced again. And I kept getting arrested. Now I want to tell you something, just so we're clear on this. Getting arrested is not a requirement to be an alcoholic. You have to actually break the law to get arrested. Some people just never do that. I happen to not only be an alcoholic, but I happen to also be a criminal. I like breaking the law. It seemed like it went hand in hand. I couldn't work, so I had to steal money. I used to pull guns on people so they would like me. And I'll tell you, if you pull a gun on somebody, they will like you. It'll be a short relationship, but they will like you for that particular moment. But I'll never forget, that when I got arrested, I had more DUIs than I can count on both hands. I had over 10 DUIs. My license was permanently revoked by the state of Florida. I'll never forget standing in front of the judge and him looking down at me. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Stephen, you're a hazard to the citizens of the state of Florida. So I'm permanently revoking your driving privileges." And I thought to myself, it really doesn't take a license to drive a car. It only takes a license when you get caught. So I left the courtroom, got in my car, and I drove home. And that's just the way I did it. So then every time I would get arrested with another DUI, they would drop the no driver's license charge. They would charge me $750. Can you imagine what would happen if I was out there drinking today? I'd be under the prison, because this is back when they didn't do all that stuff. Matter of fact, when I went through all these things in my life, all these drinking episodes, no one ever said to me, "I think you're an alcoholic." No one ever said to me, I never stood in front of a judge who said, "I'm going to sentence you to AA." That never happened. That never happened. But I want to tell you that in 1974, I went out like I always did, and I went out drinking, and I got a DUI, driving under the influence, and they took me to jail. And I got out of jail. The next morning. I went to work, and I was feeling so bad, I had to leave work early. And you know what I did? I went to the same bar, and I got drunk again. And I was sitting in this bar. One thing I'll just tell you, I don't know if this ever happened to anybody else, but alcohol had this mysterious effect on me. I could do when I would go out to bars, and I would be drinking. If I drank just the right amount of alcohol, sitting in those bars, husbands disappeared. It was an incredible phenomenon. They were there one moment, and then they were gone. And not only did the husbands disappear, it seemed to me their wives were attracted to me. So I would make inappropriate comments and inappropriate glances at their spouses, and all of a sudden they would reappear. And this particular night, they reappeared. But they reappeared. I'd walked outside of the bar, and these guys, I'd been drinking all day. They'd waited for me outside the bar. Now, I want to tell you something. I am crazy, but I'm not stupid. These 3 guys stood out in front of this bar waiting for me. And they recommended that I don't come back in the bar. And I looked at them, and I thought about it, and I thought it was probably a good idea. So I went to get in my car, and just as I got in my car, I remembered that earlier that day I had purchased a 357
Do you
Magnum,
have my tweezers?
and I had it in the glove box of my car. And when I remember that, I thought there's just one more thing that I need to explain to these guys. So I pulled the car up to the curb, and I asked them to come over. And I took the gun out of the glove box, and they came over, and I pulled the gun out, and I pulled the hammer back on it, and I said to them, "If you say one more word to me, I'm going to blow your brains out." And what they said was this: "My God, he's got a gun." And I thought to myself, "My God, I've got a gun." And I did the only thing I knew how to do. I got on the freeway there in front of this bar, and I took that gun and I pulled it out the window and I shot it. And I put it back on the glove box, and I proceeded to go down the freeway about 90 miles an hour. And I will tell you that if you go down the freeway 90 miles an hour, you will get pulled by the police. And I got pulled by 5 police officers. And I'm going to tell you that I had been drinking all day, but the adrenaline in me was going so quick that I could recite the alphabet frontwards and backwards. I could skip on one foot. I had all, but while one police officer was questioning me, the other one opened the glove box of my car. You know what he said? "My God, he's got a gun, and it's just been fired." Now, they will take you to jail for that. And they took me to jail immediately. I went to jail, and now I've gotten charged with reckless driving, carrying an unlawful weapon, and I'm in big trouble. I got out the next morning, and I went and got my car, and I went back. Excuse me, really wasn't my car; it was a company car, and because I couldn't afford a car. But I took their car back to them. And while as they were telling me that I no longer had a job, and I called my attorney to ask him what was going to happen, and he told me something I did not want to hear. He said, "Steve, I've talked to the judge, and you're going up for 5 years." And I said, You don't understand." He said, "No, you don't understand. There's nothing we can do. I have talked to the judge. I was 23 years old. I did the only thing any grown man would do. I started to cry, and I called my mom. And I said, 'Mom, I'm going to jail.' You know what she said? 'What's new?' I said, 'No, no, 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 no. You don't understand. I'm really going to jail this time. They're going to send me up for 5 years, and I can't do that.' Now, after all this, she said something to me that no one else had ever said to me. I'd never heard this before. She said, 'Steve, I think you're an alcoholic.' I thought, No, I'm not an alcoholic. Then she said to me, 'Would you like me to call somebody from AA?' Now, I don't know. That today, if you hear somebody say AA, you know what it is. I had no idea what it. I thought it was a government agency, the Department of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it meant. But I figured it was a government agency. Why else would she call them? And like I told you, I suffer from this disease called terminal intelligence. So I'm thinking in my mind, this attorney may not be able to get me out of this, but I'll get me out of it. I'll go to the Department of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll get them to certify me as an alcoholic. I'll fool them. What I'll do is I knew what they do. Once you get certified by the state, clearly they'll give you an ID card with your picture on it. That'll have your name and it'll say alcoholic. So therefore, once you're certified by the state, I would take this ID to the judge and explain to him that now that I know that I'm an alcoholic and I've been certified by the state, there's really no reason for me to go to prison. And the fact is, if the state of Florida had notified me earlier, I could have quit drinking a long time ago. So it actually wasn't my fault anyway. So she called this guy from Alcoholics Anonymous, and he called me on the phone. And here's what he said. He said, "My name's Marty, and I'm an alcoholic." I thought, this is a job title? I don't know. Yeah. And he started asking me questions. Now, I knew he worked for the government, and I'll tell you how I knew that. I'd spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, so I knew how the government worked. Marty got me on the phone, and he spent about 15 to 20 minutes asking me questions that had nothing to do with the problem. Yeah, I had a problem. I'm getting ready to go to prison for 5 years. He wants to talk to me about missing time from work as a result of my drinking. He goes through these 20 questions that had not one of them said anything about getting me out of jail. Not one of them. So I knew he worked for the guy. And then you know what he said to me? He said, "Would you like me to come by your office?" Now, at that moment, I knew I'd passed the audio part of the test. He wanted to come out and see if I looked like an alcoholic. If I passed the visual part, then I was going to get certified by this. I mean, this is coming together. I'm almost breaking my arm, patting myself on the back. I'm doing so well. But when I hung up the phone, the fear crept over me. And that is that Marty would pull up to my office in a white 1968 Ford Falcon. And on the doors, it would say Department of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he'd come in and ask me for me by name, and they'd know. Isn't that? I just got arrested in their car, and I didn't care anything about that. We don't care if anybody sees us in the middle of our disease, but heaven forbid anybody see us trying to do anything about it, right? Well, Marty pulled up to my office in a brand new Porsche. It was a program of attraction. I wanted what he had. And he came in my office. You know what he did? He started asking me the same questions that he asked me on the phone. Finally, I stopped him. I said, Marty, I got to know. Do you think I'm alcoholic? And he said, Steve, normally we let you make that decision. He said, however, in your case, I'll make the decision. I thought, I am doing so well here. This is incredible. Then you know what he said to me? He said, would you like to go to a meeting? I had no idea what that was. I said, sure, I'd love to go to a meeting. So he said, all right, I'll pick you up. So he put me up, and he took me to this meeting. He said, I want to tell you something. I was wonderful at the meeting. I really was. I was just incredible. I mean, I got emotional at the right moments. I walked out of the meetings. But you know what I found out about? Alcoholics are a little slow. Because I would get emotional, and I'd walk out of meetings, and nobody came out to save me. They all just sat there. Well, you know what happens if you walk out of meetings, no one comes out to save you? You quit walking out of meetings. So I quit doing that. I went to 4 or 5 of these meetings, and I did all this stuff. And Marty asked me this question. He said to me, Steve, are you willing to go to any length to stay sober? Now, I know that's what he said, but what I heard him say is, are you willing to do anything not to go to prison? And I said, yes, I'm even willing to go to these funky meetings. And so I got this going. And then the court decided that I needed to spend some time talking to a psychiatrist. Now, you probably can tell by my career here that I have talked to a psychiatrist before this. This was not my first experience. And you have to be trained to talk to psychiatrists, and I knew how to do that. He spent some time talking about my mother, so I spent some time talking about his mother, right? And you just have to know how to do that. And so I'm sitting there and I'm explaining this, and the psychiatrist recommended I go to a treatment center called Avon Park. Now, I'm telling you, this deal is coming together. So I'm going to court. Now, I don't have a job, but I have my own entourage. I got my court-appointed attorney. I got the court-appointed psychiatrist, and I got Marty from A&A, and we're going to court together. We're all going to court. I can never forget it. And we're sitting there, and I got everybody sitting on the bench, and they call my case up. I walk up there. My attorney walks up there. The court-appointed psychiatrist, he walks up there. And Marty, he just sits there. I turned around and I looked at Marty. He's sitting on the bench. You know what he did? He looked me straight in the face and said, it's going to be all right. I thought to myself, if I ever get out of this, I'll never go back to that A&A again. These guys do not understand. I had this all put together, and Marty, he just said, I never took in consideration that a man that I barely knew took time from his job to come sit with me in a courtroom. Because I was so selfish and self-centered, I was trying to manipulate the world like I'd always done. And I stood in front of that judge that day. You know what the judge read that psychiatric report? I told him, that he had a thing where I'd gone to A&A and all this stuff. And then, he looked me straight in the face. And he said this. He said, Steve, everybody here seems to think you're an alcoholic. He said, I want to tell you something. I don't think you're an alcoholic. See, I knew at that moment. That's why they made him the judge. He knew what I knew. I wasn't no drunk. He said to me, I think you're crazy. And I knew that was my problem. I knew I was nuts. I knew that. I knew normal people don't live like I live. Normal people don't end up in places like I do. Normal people don't say they're going to be somewhere and they can't do it when they want to do it. Yet that's the way that I live. So he knew what I knew. But then he blew it. Then he looked at me. You know what he said? He said, you're not worth being on my conscience. You can't say something to an alcoholic to make them feel worse about themselves than they already do. You couldn't say anything to me to make me hate me than I already did. I didn't care whether I was worth being on his conscience. I wasn't worth being on my conscience. I could care less about that. So he said, I'm going to send you to jail for 30 days. And when you come back, and you'll be back, I don't care if it's for jaywalking, you're going up for 5 years. And I walked out of the courtroom, and I did that 30 days in jail, and I got out. And you know who the first person called me? Marty, he called me, wanted to know if I wanted to go to an A&A meeting. Now, this is about time I had a little talk with Marty. I said, Marty, I've been to 4 or 5 of them meetings. There's a couple things I need to tell you. I said, the first thing is they read the same thing at every meeting. You think you could find something new to read. I figured you guys were so bad that you forgot that you read the same thing the night before, and you just kept reading it like you couldn't remember it. I was only 4 or 5 meetings that I could tell that. And I said to him, Marty, I want to tell you something. I really, really appreciate your help. I really do. And if there's anything that I can do to help you, please let me know. And Marty said to me, he said, Steve, he said, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a game, and we don't come here to play. He said, Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life, and you will get out of it exactly what you put into it. He said, people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and they play around with this thing, and they go back out, and they die, or they go insane through the use of alcohol and drugs. And I know what he's doing. He's trying to scare me. But you can't scare me. You cannot scare an alcoholic, because we've been terrified our whole life. I wake up in the morning with fear in my gut. Alcohol takes it away. And I knew this. See, I'll tell you this. What I knew when I was sitting there and I was talking to Mark, when I was standing there in front of the judge, here's what I knew. Alcohol works. I knew that when I drank, it would change the way that I felt. I knew that when I drank, it would change the perception. I knew that when I drank, I would feel better than you. I knew that. And when I was sober, I couldn't stand it. So I listened to Marty, and I told him I appreciated it. I really did. And if I ever needed him, I'd give him a call. And that ex-wife of mine let me come back, and we had a son. My son was around 2 years old. And you know what I did? I went out to those bars every night, and I didn't drink. I just drank $1.75 7-Up. That's what I drank. A long time ago, and that's expensive. That's expensive 7-Up. I went out there and I'd stay home. I'd stay out till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd come home. And you know what she'd say to me? She said, if you're going to stay out till 3 o'clock in the morning, you might as well be drunk. Now, do you know how tough it is to stay out till 3 o'clock in the morning and stay sober? You think she'd appreciate that, but she didn't. She didn't appreciate it at all. But you know what happened? I went out to that bar the next night, and I had some really good friends that took time to evaluate my case. Those friends of mine in that bar, and one of them came up to me and said, look, I've thought about your situation. He said, baby, you need to stay away from hard liquor. That's what you need to do. He said, I've really given this a lot of thought. I touched my heart. The man took time out of his life to evaluate my situation. You know what he said to me? He said, what you need to do is smoke marijuana and drink wine. You know what? Bless his heart. He could be right. He could be. That night I became a great connoisseur of wine. And if you're an alcoholic and you're a great connoisseur of wine, what that means is you sit in the liquor store and you look at those wine bottles, and you look at it because you're trying to read the alcohol content, right? I mean, I drank wine and I'd never seen a grape. You know what I'm talking about? And so, and then I'd come home drunk, and then I'd walk in that house, and there I had to face who I was, because I'd look at her, and the pain was there, and I could see what I'd done. I looked at that son of mine, and I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't do it. So I moved out. I did the only thing I knew to do. I just moved out. And we weren't married, and so I got some little job, and I got a little apartment, and I got my son every other weekend, and he was 2 years old. And I got him one weekend, and I was out of this apartment complex, and everybody was drinking beer, so I started drinking beer. And then at about 5 or 6 o'clock, inside, I got cleaned up, and I've been drinking all day, and I went out, and I came home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I opened the door to my apartment. There he was, asleep on the couch, my 2-year-old son. I'd left him alone all night. And I want to tell you something. I could not have hated myself worse than I hated myself that night. And I was terrified. I was terrified of the reality that I couldn't be responsible, not for one day. Not for one day. And I did the only thing I knew how to do. I took him back to his mother, and I knew one person. I lived in Jacksonville. I knew one person that lived in Santa Barbara, California. I called her up on the phone, and clearly she didn't know me very well. Because when I called her on the phone, I said to her, I'm thinking about coming out to Santa Barbara. Do you think that would be a good idea? Oh, that would be a great idea. You could stay at my house. I'm gone. Because how can I go to this mother and say, I can't take our son for one day because I can't stay sober. I cannot be responsible for 24 hours. I couldn't say that. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I left. And I went out and I stayed at this girl's house, and I came home. I did the same thing in California that I did in Jacksonville. Matter of fact, I got there and I realized all the people I'd left in Jacksonville, they were in California. They changed their names and they changed their faces, but they were the same because I was the same. And I attracted exactly what I was. Yep. And I went out every night, and I pulled up to her driveway one morning around 4 o'clock in the morning, in her car. And she met me in the driveway. And she said, Steve, you have to move. And I said, does that mean at the end of the month? And she said, no, you have to move now. I said, well, can you give me to the end of the week? And she said, no, you need to move today. And I said, but you don't understand. I don't have any money. And she said, that's a problem, but it's not my problem. And I want to tell you, when that happens, you're homeless. And that's what happened to me. And now I'm in and I do recommend, if you're going to be homeless, I recommend Santa Barbara. It's a great place to be homeless. I got to sleep under a huge fig tree, me and all the other bums, right near the ocean. And there's a little bathhouse you get cleaned up. And so that's where I went. And I figured out how to get a little money, steal some money, or do whatever I had to do so I could drink. And I want to tell you this. Here's what happened. Alcohol systematically took everybody out of my life that ever tried to help me. Everybody out of my life that ever reached out and tried to do for me what they couldn't do. Took them all out. And when everybody was gone, alcohol left. And I want to tell you, the worst place you can be as an alcoholic is drunk and stuck with you. And that's where I got it. No matter how much I drank, I couldn't turn my head on. I couldn't make the magic come back. I drank, and all I could do was get physically drunk. And the more I drank, the more I hated me. And it dawned on me, and I was terrified of reality. I am stuck with me for the rest of my life. I can't escape anymore. There's nobody else to call. I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, I remembered in the back of my mind a guy in Jacksonville, Florida, in a courtroom who looked me straight in the face and said, it's going to be all right. So June 17th, 1976, I called the intergroup office in Santa Barbara, California, and this woman from Dallas, Texas answered the phone. And I said, and she said, hello. I said, my name's Steve, and I got a problem. She said, I know, honey, I got the same problem. And I thought it was strange. I hadn't told her what my problem was yet. And she said to me, well, can you come up here to the intergroup office? And I said that I could, but I wanted to get dressed for my interview with A&A. And so when you're homeless, and I would tell you what I looked like when I came to you. When I came to you, I was 25 years old. I weighed about 285 pounds. I had an afro. I had a Fu Manchu. I put on my best pink suit. I put on a blue silk shirt. I put on a pink tie with a picture of a naked lady on it. I put on my platform shoes, and I'm ready for my interview at A&A. And I want to tell you something. You don't look that way by accident. I actually thought I looked good. And I walked up to Alcoholics Anonymous and you know what it said on the door? I was shocked. It said Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought, what if somebody sees me going in here? I'm sleeping under a tree. And I'm worried about what people are going to think. And I walked in that group. And I want to tell you, there was a guy standing in that office. And I want to tell you this. He was about 45 years old. He had a cowboy hat in his hand. He had a pair of jeans. He had on a sports jacket with patches on the sleeve. And he looked like I wanted to feel. And he told me some words almost 45 years ago that I'll never want to forget. He said to me, Steve, if you have a war going on inside, it makes no difference who wins, you lose. And I want to tell you something. I had a war going on inside. He said, the only way to win this battle is to surrender. I didn't know anything about surrender, but I knew I'd been beat into submission. He asked me the same question that Marty had asked me 2 years earlier. He said, Steve, are you willing to go to any length to stay sober? When Marty asked me that, what I heard him say was, were you willing to do anything not to go to prison? The answer was yes. When Jim asked me that question 2 years later, what I heard him say is, are you willing to do anything not to hurt anymore? Because I hurt all the time. I couldn't make the pain go away. I could not make it go away. And I knew I was stuck with it. I was willing to do anything not to hurt. And he said to me, he said, okay, you got to go to a meeting tonight. And I said, but I can't go to a meeting tonight. He said, I thought you were willing to go to any length. I said, I am. I said, but I'm sleeping under this tree. And if I go to this meeting, people will steal my stuff. He said, you got to go to a meeting. He said, I'll have somebody come. I know where the tree is. I'll have somebody come pick you up. And so I tell you, I went down there and I waited and I waited. And the guy came pick me up. I left my stuff there and I got to this meeting. I want to tell you, I thought I'd reach heaven. I got this. You know what they had? They had stale donuts and coffee. And so I went up to the donut table and I thought I was getting away with something. I'm sticking donuts in my pocket, right? They didn't care, but I thought I was getting away with something, right? And then there happened to be another guy at the meeting sleeping under the tree with me. We had different routes. We weren't sleeping under the same routes. We had our own little condos. And so he comes up to me and he says, Steve, he said, when we leave the meeting, we'll walk back to our tree. You want to smoke some marijuana? I said, whoa, slow down. I got to get sober here. I can't, be out there doing that stuff. He said, chill out, man. He said, I just asked you. And he lost. You know what I did? I left that meeting. I smoked my own marijuana. Yeah, because I want to look good while I'm dying. I don't want you to know that I can't do it. And I did. I'm so grateful when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. No one said to me, don't come back. And for 10 days, from June 17th, 1976 to June 27th, 1976, every day I left that meeting, I smoked that marijuana. Finally, a guy came up to me and he said this. He said, Steve, if you're not sure you want what we have, ask yourself this question. Do you want what you have? And I said, God, I don't want what I have. I don't want what I have. And that night I went and I flushed everything on June 27th, 1976. And I was terrified because that night I knew I truly was alone. I truly was stuck with me. And I tell you something, I was willing to do whatever they asked me to do. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my first thought was this. I said, I need one of two things. Number one, I need somebody to loan me some money, or I need a woman looking for a homeless man. And they're both in Alcoholics Anonymous. They just had nothing to do with me. So that's what I thought my solution was. If I just find a woman that would take me in, or somebody that would loan me some money, I'll be all right. And I'm so grateful that I got a sponsor the first day I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what he told me? He said, Steve, I didn't put you under that tree. You did. It's not my job to get you out. It's yours. But if you want to get out from underneath that tree, I'll show you what to do. And if you'll do that, you'll never have to go back under that tree again. That's been 45 years ago, and I've never had to sleep under a tree since then. Because he didn't do it for me. He gave me the tools. He said, you are responsible. What a novel idea. I always thought you were responsible. I didn't know that I was no longer the victim. I was responsible for where I was. I couldn't blame other people. I couldn't blame my childhood. I couldn't blame any other situation. I had to take responsibility for my behavior. My sponsor, he said to me, he said, I don't want you to get emotionally involved for the first year. No relationship for the first year. That's the most insane thing that you could ever say to an alcoholic is don't get emotionally involved for the first year. I got emotionally involved holding hands during the Lord's Prayer. You know what I'm saying? At the end of it, when they say, keep coming back, and she gives you that special squeeze that, nobody else in the room's getting it but you, and you know that God sent her there for you. I'm in a relationship. She doesn't even know about it. And I'm figuring in my mind, when she gives me that special squeeze that we're going to be Mr. and Mrs. AA. And life is good, and it's always going to be good. And then after the meeting, she leaves with her husband. I think life is really bad, and it's never going to get good. But you know what? I did what he asked me to do. You know what I found out? I found out I couldn't have a relationship with you until I had a relationship with me. See, you taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous that you can't give away what you don't have. And if all you have is hate for you, there's no way you can love someone else. You taught me here in Alcoholics Anonymous, if I would start living differently and start being responsible, start doing what I said, I would start feeling better about who I was. You see, I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous and you said, welcome, you belong here. That didn't make me feel like I belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of people told me I belong places, didn't make me feel. But when you said to me, reach out to the alcoholic sitting next to you, make phone calls to see how other people are doing, get in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, become active. And when you do those things, when you reach out to another alcoholic, you make those phone calls. Ask people how they're doing when you don't care. One day will happen when you do care, and it'll scare you. All of a sudden, you have somebody and they want to tell you, and you want to hear it. And the next day you walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and someone comes up to you and says, thanks for making that call. Then I felt like a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not because you said I was, but because you gave me the tools to be in the middle of the program. Because you gave me the tools to be one of many. You see, little by little, we come into Alcoholics Anonymous and we surrender. and we start getting a life that we start getting some sane behavior in. Then we make a decision, turn our will and life over to the care of a God that we don't understand. And then we take a look at ourselves like we never have before. We take a look at who we are. And then we share that with God and with another human being. And we're absolutely sure that when I share who I am with another human being, that'll be the end of my tour at Alcoholics Anonymous. They'll say things like, you might be an alcoholic, Steve, but you got some problems we're not prepared to deal with. You definitely need some outside help. But you know what I found out? Here's what I found out. When I shared who I was with another human being, for the first time in my life, I found out the meaning of intimacy. See, I've been married and divorced 3 times. I've been in and out all kinds of relationships. And the first intimate relationship I had was with a 49-year-old man with a flat top. Because I told him who I was. No one else ever knew that. I shared with him all those deep, dark secrets. You know what he said? Me too. Me too. You see what I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous? It's not our strengths that bring us together. It's our weaknesses. The fact that you can look at someone else and when they're falling apart or they're uncovering and discovering who they are, the person next to them and say, me too. Me too. But guess what? We don't have to do that today. Today, we don't have to do that. You know what? You taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have to act based on what I think. And I don't have to act based on what I feel. And you know what happens when I start acting differently than the way I think? My thinking changes. When I start acting differently than the way I feel, my feeling changes. And one day at a time, it comes little by little by little. And I'm a guy that I asked my sponsor, I said, what do you think I should do for a career? And he said, well, why don't you try getting a job? And so I got a job. You know what I found out? I didn't know how to be. If you're a bad employee when you're drinking, guess what? You can be a bad employee in sobriety. But your difference is if you're an Alcoholics Anonymous, you can learn how to be a good employee. You learn how to go to work on time, stay there all day, and actually do something while you're there. That way, when they give you a check, you don't have to rationalize or excuse it. You've actually earned it. And you know what happens when you do that? You get to step just a little bit quicker. You get to hold your head up just a little bit higher. You don't have to excuse or rationalize anybody where you're at. You get to feel good about who you are. And little by little things. And all of a sudden, I started doing those things. I started showing up at work. I started having a good attitude, asking people how I could help. I'd get there early. I'd reach out to other people. And little by little, my whole life changed. God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I went from a guy that couldn't get out of his own way to a guy that owned the largest remodeling company in the United States. I had over 1,000 employees. I'm a guy who couldn't hold a job. I'm a guy who couldn't get out of his way. I got 1,000 employees. People say, well, how do you do that? I said, I don't do it. I show up, do my part. God takes care of the rest. And when he's ready for me to move on, I'll move on. It's his business. It's not mine. I'm not capable. The best I can do in life is end up in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my very best effort. Everything else from there has been you and God. I'm a guy, I told you, I was married and divorced 3 times when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been married to the same woman for 31 years. Yeah. And in 31 years, I haven't found it necessary to date anybody else. I mean, I'm going to tell you something. That may not sound big to anybody else, but it's incredible to me. It's absolutely phenomenal. And here's the thing is that you taught me how to do that. You taught me how to do that. You said, Steve, you're not responsible for what she does. You're not responsible for you to. Your commitment is to be the best husband you can be one day at a time. And I made a commitment to do that. I want to share with you one last thing that the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the thing that the most powerful thing that we do every single day is carry this message. Reach out to other people. Why do we do that? Do we do it to save other people? No, we don't do it to save other people. We do it to save ourselves. You know, when I was sober about 3 years, I got in a relationship. Well, it looked like a relationship to me. She wasn't in the program, so I think she was just mildly amused by who I was. And so I got in a relationship with her, and I moved from Santa Barbara. I moved to Tampa for business purposes, and I called her, and I said to her, I've been thinking about this, and I think we should get married. And she said, No, I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, Well, does that mean that you want to wait until around the holidays? And she said, No. I said, Well, does that mean you want to wait till after the first of the year? He said, Listen closely. No, I don't want to get married. I want to tell you what, I've been sober 3 years. I hung up the phone. I didn't want to drink. I wanted to die because I hurt so bad. And I did the only thing I knew how to do. I called my sponsor and I started telling him. I said, Let me tell you what you, and all of a sudden I realized he hung up on me. I called him back and I said, Hey, Jim, we got disconnected. That's right. And we'll continue to get disconnected as long as you want to talk about her because there's nothing we can do for her. He said, If you want to talk about you, he said, I'll be glad to share with you my experience and strength, and maybe you can get some hope. So I tell him what's going on with me. You know what he says to me? He said, I want you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. He said, I want you to get there 30 minutes early. I want you to shake hands with people coming in. I want you to call another alcoholic every day just to see how they're doing. I said, What are you talking about? I've been sober 3 years. I don't have to do that. He hung up on me. I went to those meetings. I want to tell you something. Every day I hated it. I hated it. They don't do it right in Tampa. He said, Well, are they staying sober? I said, Yeah. He said, Well, find out what they're doing and start doing that. On and on. I'm just, every day I'm going to meetings. I'm, Poor me, poor me, poor me. I feel so bad. Finally, I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. They called me. You know what they said to me? They said, We got a drunk on a park bench. You need to go pick him up and take him to the hospital. Here's what I said. I'm sober 3 years. Here's what I said to him. Let him die. Why in the hell won't somebody help me? I'm trying to stay sober. They hung up on me. And all I could remember my sponsor was saying this. You don't have to like it. You just have to do it. And I got in my car and I didn't like it and I didn't care about this guy. And I went and I picked him up on a park bench and I put him in my car. And we got a couple miles down the road and he got so sick. I got out of my car and I went over the side of the car and he's sitting on the side of the road and he's throwing up and blood's coming out. I put my arm around him. And in 5 minutes, I thought about somebody else other than me. And he carried the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to me. You see, I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous in June of 1976, and I was the problem. And I want to tell you, standing in front of you today, I'm still the problem. I'm so grateful that you've given me the tools to get out of the way and let God in. Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. That was absolutely amazing.